How are we going to save Social Security? Hi, I'm financial planner Sean Mullaney. Let's discuss. So, Social Security is a significant part of the vast majority of Americans' retirement savings, right? Even for those Americans who have built up substantial retirement assets, Social Security plays a major role, even if it's only a backstop. And for most Americans, it's certainly more than just a backstop, right? It is a vital part of retirement security. And I think we can all agree that unfortunately there are fiscal holes in Social Security's future. Now, it's not that Social Security is just going to go bankrupt and will pay $0 one day, but there are significant deficits when it comes to future potential expenditures by Social Security versus revenues coming in. And so the question then becomes, well, how do we solve this Social Security fiscal problem? And I think the way to approach it is this. If we can answer, well, who pays for the deficit in Social Security? Once you answer that pressing question, how you solve for it really sort of falls right out, right? It becomes pretty simple once we've solved that difficult question. And I do think we should just theoretically consider all options, right? Two options, I think sadly we have to, sadly or not sadly, I don't know, depends on your perspective. But two options I think we have to eliminate are one, foreign plunder, right? In theory, we go up to Canada, steal all their maple syrup, sell it, and use the money for Social Security. Foreign plunder is not going to be the answer. The other thing is, hey, maybe the aliens come and we just invoice them, right? Hey, welcome to planet Earth. Now, would you mind coughing up some money for Social Security? Not going to happen, right? So what that means is Social Security's fiscal holes are going to have to be plugged by some cohort of Americans or several cohorts of Americans. And then we have to think about, well, who are those Americans who should be paying to solve the Social Security fiscal deficit? Some commentators, I'm going to link to a post that's on the Cato website. It says, well, one way we could do this is just delay implementation of Social Security. Say, make full retirement age 70 instead of 67. And maybe even say you can't even collect Social Security until 65 instead of 62. Well, what that proposal does is two things. One, it basically says the people who should solve for the holes in Social Security, who should be assessed that, are those Americans in their 60s, right? It doesn't ask, well, wait a minute, are Americans in their 60s doing better or worse than all other cohorts of Americans? And I'm here to tell you there are some cohorts of Americans who are doing a lot better than those in their 60s as a whole, right? Now, yes, there's some in their 60s who are killing it. They got tons of assets, maybe tons of income. But as a group, those in their 60s are sort of, there's some people doing very well, some people doing average, some people doing poorly. As a group, they don't strike me as a group well positioned to cough up the Social Security deficit. Here's another problem with this idea of, well, we'll just delay collecting Social Security and that'll solve the problem. In that Cato piece, the author admits that to delay collecting Social Security until 65, to push back full retirement age to age 70, those sorts of proposals, in 10 years of implementation, they don't collect a single penny. They don't move the needle in any direction or any positive direction to close the deficit. Why? Because any delay in the retirement age is itself going to have to be delayed. You can't talk to somebody who is age 65 today and say, you know what, we're going to push your full retirement age to age 70, right? There'll be a political revolution if that happens. So any pushing back of Social Security is itself going to be delayed. Well, does that work for your kitchen sink? Say, you go home tonight and there's a leak in the kitchen sink and you say, well, we got to call a plumber. And the plumber says, oh, okay, fine, happy to help you. I'll be over with my truck and my tools in 10 years, right? If delaying the solution is not good enough for your kitchen sink, it's not good enough for Social Security. We need some solutions that start working now or at least in the new year, right? Sometimes you got to, have a little implementation to delay to make things fair and equitable and implement, right? Okay, so having people in their 60s make up the deficit isn't going to work. Well, what about just increase the FICA tax. We've done that so many times in American history. That makes sense, right? Well, I'm against that for several reasons. One, we've been increasing that tax a bunch. It's up to 6.2% employee, 6.2% employer. If we further increase it, we're basically disincentivizing employers from offering jobs in the United States. You know what I'd like to have a lot of in the United States? Jobs, right? And if we up that FICA tax one more time, well, guess what? We make it 6.5 employee, employer. Guess what we're doing? We're saying, you know what? First of all, even, employees in their 20s and 30s who aren't necessarily doing that great, they're going to have to bear the burden. Two, it's going to be a tax on employment in the United States, right? That's going to give employers all sorts of incentive to do more offshoring, to do more automation, and have fewer jobs in the United States. That doesn't seem like a good answer, does it? And here's another thought about that. Increasing those taxes is necessarily going to mean an increase in the self-employment tax pretty much, right? Being self-employed ain't easy, right? And so now we're going to make it even harder by increasing taxes on the self-employed. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Well, think about, I alluded to it's not all that fair to increase taxes on workers. Well, why is that? Well, I'm going to link to an essay that Orrin Cass wrote. And he had a really good point. He said, look, if we look at the stock market surges over the last 50 years, it's, very impressive, right? So basically shareholders, people who have had stocks, equities, have done very well over the last 50 years. And that's great. I don't begrudge them 1 cent, and that's fantastic. How have ordinary workers done? Not so well. Real wages are mostly stagnant over the last few decades, particularly for the middle class, the working class. So this idea that we're just going to assess tax on workers and employers and not even think about assessing tax on shareholders, that makes no sense to me. But it does sort of lead to the answer to my question. Those who have held financial assets, particularly stocks, have done really well. Well, let's start to think about who could now solve this problem of the Social Security fiscal hole. One are just workers who are making over $200,000. We can look to the Affordable Care Act provisions, right? It imposed a surtax on earnings if you're over $200,000, $250,000 if you're married. That surtax can be increased, and it wouldn't be that detrimental, right? Even doubling or more than doubling that surtax, it's 0.9% today on Medicare. It could be easily increased to 2%. I'm not saying that has no ramifications, no downside. It's not great. It's not great to increase taxes, but Social Security is a vitally important program in this country, and somebody's got to pay for it, right? So that's one area we could increase taxes. What about those shareholders, those people who have enjoyed investment returns, interest dividends, who have incomes over $200,000 or $250,000 married? There's a 3.8% Medicare tax on them. Why don't we just increase that to maybe 5% and put that 1.2% into Social Security? Perfect, no, but better than letting Social Security fail or having Social Security pay out a lot less in benefits. Then think about, too, who owns stocks? There's one group that owns stocks that are doing great, and that's university endowments. There are now university endowments that are worth figures that are just astronomical. Harvard University, Yale University, and they're certainly not alone. It's not just those two. They own tens of billions of dollars, and they pay hardly any tax. Now, yes, in late 2017, Congress added a very tiny tax to only a small handful of those endowments. I say, look, if an endowment's got $1 billion and it's with a college, right, who you got to remember doesn't pay a penny of tax on tuition, doesn't pay a penny of tax on donations, right? Why shouldn't those endowments pay a 25% tax on their investment income, right? Let them have the tuition tax-free. Let them have the donations tax-free. But what are we supporting here by letting these huge endowments pay almost no tax, right? Does it really matter for American society, for the quality of life of the average American, whether Harvard's endowment is worth 40 billion or 60 billion? It makes not an iota of difference to the lived experience of most of our fellow countrymen, yet we want to persist with Harvard's endowment being able to pay a 1.4% tax rate. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. No offense to those with that opinion. But what I say is, look, Harvard University can still pay no tax on their tuition, no tax on their donations collected. I say that's a pretty good deal. And the U.S. should assess a 25% tax on their net investment income, which would be directed towards saving Social Security and potentially Medicare as well. I think that's a pretty fair and equitable solution. What do you think? I'm going to link to a recent blog post I did that details my thoughts on this. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please mash that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.